Are we video too?
No, we don't use the video.
So I can whip out my dick like that guy from CNN. you can put that in the recording.
Yeah, we'll leave that on. That'll be the true intro.
Cool.
All right, welcome everybody to the Sprint Jump Throw Performance Podcast. I'm Joel Reinhardt along with Andrew Cormier. I'm very lucky today to have on Keir Wenham-Flatt, formerly of William & Mary, and you all know the good work he does with Strength Coach Network and Rugby Strength Coach. So thanks for doing this, Keir.
Appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, so we'll hop right into it. This is, I guess, like a big overarching question that we'll have a million different rabbit holes going off of it. But AC put this in with, how would you, and you can start this wherever you want, how would you change the collegiate athletics model?
I think, I've been fortunate enough to work in good organizations, and I've been unfortunate enough to work in bad organizations. And when you tend to reflect on successful organizations, you tend to see there's perfect alignment between everyone in the organization. So front of house, back of house, support staff, playing staff, coaching staff, like all, anyone that's involved. There's a clear understanding of what it is you're going to achieve. And that always has to be the filter that you pass decisions through. So, famously, British rowing, the question was, is it going to make the boat go faster? And if the answer is yes, we do it. And if the answer is no, it's superfluous, we get rid of it. And when it went best for me, it was, is this going to help us win the Rugby World Cup? And we had, effectively, he is, I think he's the vice chairman of World Rugby, or he just finished up Augustin Pichot, who was effectively the power within the Argentinian Union. And he had very much publicly said that we were going to make the World Cup final in 2019, and every decision that we're going to make between now and then was to move us closer towards that goal. And in my opinion, a major weakness amongst bad college organizations is they try to be all things to all men or women. So, we're going to be a force for good in the community. We're going to generate revenue. We're going to win championships. We're going to do that. We're going to do that. At some point, if you try and be everything, you end up being nothing, really. And I think you kind of have to accept the reality that there's no such thing as a free lunch. And when you prioritize certain objectives, you, by definition, place more value on some things and less value on other things, which means that you're going to have to make difficult decisions and have difficult conversations through that filter. And, all men are created equally. Some are created more equal than others. No, this doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. We're going to take all these resources and we're going to allocate them to the revenue generating sports. And I understand that there's a legal implication to that with Title IX and stuff like that, but it's a fact that football and basketball keep the lights on. They generate the bulk of the revenue. And when business is going good, you double down on the products that sell and you cut the losses elsewhere. And unfortunately, in capitalist America, you'd think that would be second nature, but there's the idea that everyone has to get the same access to coaches, resources, time and facilities, all that kind of stuff. And it makes you very, very unpopular. But what happens is, the more plates that you're spinning, the more likely it is that one of those plates falls down. Yeah. So good organizations implicitly understand that, and sometimes even explicitly they say that, and they allocate their staff in that way, they allocate their resources in that way, their facilities. And bad ones try and be all things to all men, and it's club sports and a fancy wrapper. So I'd say it's like the alignment top to bottom in the organization, the understanding about being really focused in what it is you're trying to achieve. And if we look at the most successful universities in the country, typically there's going to be one or two things that they're really well known for, and then they kind of average at the rest. And you have to be cognizant of that fact and then, lean on it. And then I would say one thing that really needs to change is this middle ground with staffing. In the real world, if you expose yourself to a ton of risk, which is you can be fired, it's normally accepted that you expose yourself to a ton of upside in potential reward. So if you're an investment banker and you bet the house, if you lose that bet, you're going to get fired. But if you win that bet, you get a big reward, you get a promotion, you get all that other kind of stuff. In the fucked up world of sport, you take on all of the risk and get none of the reward. So, come and do this job. There's a good chance that we're going to fire you in 1 or 2 years. And by the way, we're going to pay you 40 grand and there's no bonus if you do your job well.
Yeah.
There's that misalignment. Nassim Taleb talks about symmetry. When it's good for you, it's good for me. When it's bad for you, it's bad for me. But in sport, what happens is you have people that are incentivized to just basically live in the middle because they've got no incentive to work really, really hard because they're not going to get a bonus, and they're not going to do bad at their job because they don't want to get fired. So they just kind of live in this middle zone. Mm-hmm. And if I ruled the world, I would have either permanent employees that basically you just can't be fired, or I would have highly incentivized employees where they share in the success of the organization. And I would make sure that every single person in the building can state what the goal is, state what the chosen path of the organization is going to be towards that goal, how their role contributes to that, how they're going to measure it, and how they're going to evaluate their progress of working towards that over time publicly. So whenever I've managed a staff, you're expected to present once a semester. Here's what we talked about last time. Here's the changes I made. Here's what the results were. Here's what's good. Here's what's bad. Here's how we're going to move forward. And that does not happen in a lot of organizations, in my opinion, especially sport performance coach to sport coach.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you were saying too, like stuck in that medium ground, what jumped in my head was what you then touched on. I was like, especially if you're in the medium ground and you don't have, your job is something that is not often objectively measured.
Yeah.
And there's a million different positions in athletics that are like that. I mean, sports performance is the one that is obvious, but even just some others of like, athletic training, even just like, like facilities, people like, what is it, like things go wrong and things go right, but like what are the metrics of like over time longitudinally what's going on?
Can you define it? Can you measure it? Yeah. And here's the thing, can you imagine if like they do Senate hearings, right? Can you imagine if let's say big tech or military came into a Senate hearing and they said, okay, we've given you X $100 million for the project that you said you were going to embark on. What's the status update? And say, oh, well, we've been working on the blue collar work ethic. Everyone's feeling really, really good about the project. We think we're turning a corner and blah, 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 blah. And so, okay, well, what numbers do you have to back it up? Oh, well, we're not really focused on numbers. We're looking at changing the culture and blah, blah, blah. Like, you'd be kicked out of Congress. So if you're going to command millions and millions and millions of dollars, you have to be willing to measure in accordance with that.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. Even my dad has done a lot of work with the DOD and he works in computer science. And he said he loves it because you go into meetings and it's like, hey, we need this done. And they go, can you do it? And if the answer is no, it's okay. Thanks for your time. See you later.
Yeah.
And if the answer is yes, then you move on to further and further questions.
There is nuance in that, the kind of truism, like everything that matters can't be measured. Everything that measures, doesn't matter. Is it that? But what it is, people are confronted with that nuance and they just give up altogether and don't measure at all. And the truth is, it's like you should measure what you can measure, and you should consider that in the grand scheme of things. You should understand that no one person is responsible for one area. But if we're members of a multidisciplinary staff and the injury rates are doing this, somebody's messed up. Yeah. And it's like we've all had those conversations, and I bet it happens in the second week of camp, where you sit them down and you say, by definition, we are not doing well right now. Why? Yeah.
That's one way. Like that's another one too, because it's like that's a way you could measure. I know some sports performance coaches do, where it's like whatever it is, maybe it's non-contact soft tissue injuries, and they're like, they hang their hat on that. But then some of those people, it's like, maybe that's a good metric, but then their sport coaches don't give a shit about like listening to them about any sort of management or anything like that. And it's like, well, then you might be hanging your hat on something you have very little actual control over, even if you do an amazing job of prep throughout the off season.
Yeah.
If it's then like whatever, camp goes off the fucking rails, and you could have had on paper and even in practice, you had an amazing where you got them ready for however many high speed yards and you got them ready for all these contacts. And then if things go off the rails because your coaches just tell you to fuck off, like, if you're hanging your hat on a metric that you really don't have much control over, then you can get fucked. But I guess if you like,
I mean, months of preparation can be undone in a couple of days.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So it's that, does it matter? Do you have the authority and the responsibility?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because you say, oh, you're responsible for this. Well, fucking let me control it then.
Yeah.
I also feel like in college, it's very rare to have the administration or overseers aware of what goes into that also, of all the realms, to actually like effectively evaluate everyone involved in X sport for whatever it is that they're trying to make sure goes really well.
Because they're all pen pushers.
Yeah.
This is the problem. Who was I talking to? Carl Valley. Name an AD that used to be a strength coach.
Yeah.
Doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So this is the problem. The college sector in general is so much more concerned about appearance and cover your ass more than performance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Really.
And truthfully, if you had performance-minded individuals in those roles, I don't know how they would fare politically, but then obviously it would be a different kind of culture. But, asking somebody to evaluate someone through a lens of sports performance when you have no experience of being in that environment, that's a real problem.
Yeah. And that's probably, that's one of the other things, one of the notes I have is, doesn't the problem ultimately come back to administrators and athletic directors?
Of course. Yeah.
Some are, there are some, I don't think it's all the way to the extreme of like, if I'm overseeing you, I need to be able to execute your job. I mean, there's the examples in the governing dynamics where he talks about Fitzgerald's friend
owns the factory.
He's like, I can do anything in this factory, and I don't.
That's an extreme example.
Yeah, and I don't think that's necessarily applicable in sports. Like,
I agree.
Our athletic director shouldn't have to. He doesn't need to know how to run an athletic training.
Can you even define what it is I do?
Yeah, but you need
most they say, oh, they do the strength and the conditioning.
Yeah,
exactly. That's a problem.
Yeah, and even so, I mean, we see it with us. Like, I mean, we're definitely in the rebuilding stages from a football perspective, and the on-field product is not where we want it to be. But like the energy and just like overall momentum that we've been building out of our realm has been great. And of course, they love just pumping it out on social media. And donors are taking notice, which we love because we're getting a bunch of fancy toys and stuff. But it's like, are the people who are like giving us this money and like even like green lighting, like, hey, you guys are doing great. Like, do you even know what we're doing? Like,
here's one thing that kills me, right?
Yeah.
Every organization says you win with people, right?
Yeah.
When was the last time you saw a big donation where a portion of that donation was earmarked for the recruitment, training, and retainment of a high performance staff?
Never.
Exactly. So you can have a whole lot coming out your mouth, but I'm going to look at where you spend your money, and that's going to tell me what you really value. And I actually said this in a meeting. I was like, you keep telling me we win with people, and there's cockroaches running around the bathrooms, and there's nowhere to like sleep, even though we're here 14 hours a day. I was like, how much of that money is going to go towards convincing people to stay? Because I said, if we need to take money off the table. If you pay like shit, the second somebody offers more, they're going to go. So you need to take just off the table and then be honest and say, hey, we can't really compete on money. We're going to compete on every other factor. We're going to feed you. We're going to give you somewhere to shower. We're going to give you somewhere to sleep. We're going to give you plenty of continuing education. There's going to be socials. You're going to, it happens in English rugby. There's actually a wage cap in French rugby, which is 4 times the size of English rugby. And yet Saracens have been one of the most dominant teams in European rugby for the last 5 to 10 years. And I've worked with athletes that got recruited to go there from France. So they took pay cuts to go there, and they bring them around and they say, hey, we're not gonna match your wages in France, but there's a creche over there. We're going to look after your kids when you come to work. Here's the catering that we do every single day, and the wives come to lunch. And we do a trip every 3 to 6 months or something. They go on these like mad fucking trips. Like they literally just like drop them off in the middle of nowhere in France and say, all right, find your way back. And just stuff like that. And I have never encountered a group of players and coaches that were so universally hated by everyone else and how much they loved one another.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing that I wish I could have stolen.
Yeah. I mean, it goes back to what you said earlier too, of like most athletics programs, they like the outside image more than the actual result. And that comes back to where you allocate money, because I've seen this is at Nickel State too.
Yeah.
Where, definitely a smaller program, but they did it a little bit differently, where they had the NCAA minimum amount of sports on purpose, so you could pump all your money into like,
as it should be.
Yeah. But then it was like, Greg, my boss there, he didn't even have, when I got there, he didn't have a full-time assistant with 16 sports. It was him and a bunch of like part-time GAs. But then, you put a brand new like $500,000 scoreboard in the football stadium.
And then tell the staff we have no money.
Yeah. And it's like, but those things, if you tweet out like, or put up some great Instagram graphic of, hey, we hired this new person, it's like, oh, whatever. But you can do this great hype video, the new scoreboard, and you can show the reveal video when you show the players and they go crazy, and like that looks nice, and it's very outwardly like, hey, look what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Versus like, hey, we got our director of strength and conditioning who's been here for 6 years, a full-time assistant, and so his quality of life, subjectively for him went up of 50% or whatever.
Yeah.
It's not.
It's one of those things that, like, to me, winning is the ultimate recruitment.
Yeah.
Yeah. The All Blacks have no home stadium, no home performance center. There's them and Argentina have no home stadium. So they just, like, wherever they go, they just fucking go around the country and train in all these random gyms.
Wow.
Yeah.
Most successful sports team in history.
Yeah.
I'd also be curious too of like the metrics for just like how often are people being honest with the fact that like, hey, you're coming in to recruit and like tour and you're going to talk to our sports performance coach associated with our team. How often is it that person will not be there in a year or two to actually assist in your development? Like, how often is there turnover where in reality we're not developing you anywhere as well as it could be because we undervalue everyone associated in this program? And
I put it out today. Every data point is a lesson waiting to be learned. Now, have you ever heard of centralized data surviving the turnover of the staff? No. The staff goes, the data goes with it. So it's like you're learning the same lessons over and over and over again. So the way that you get around that is you have an administration that leads from the top and says, right, this is our data. We're going to collect it. You need to do this. And it really, in my opinion, for the Olympic side, it should be done across sports. Because what you typically find is you buy the same product from 5 different companies, and then all the staff have to learn 5 different softwares and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That should happen. Or if you accept the fact that the data is going to go, you should, hire slow, fire fast. You need to attract the absolute best individuals that you can, and then hold on to them for dear life. Mm-hmm. And if you're looking at staff members and saying, I'm not sure he's the right material to be here for 5+ years, you picked one.
Exactly.
Yeah. Shadid tells us that all the time too.
Yeah.
In our we had like our end of year or end of fiscal year, like performance reviews or whatever.
Yeah.
And he's like, hey, all of these are going to be positive because bad shit that comes up, I tell you when it comes up.
Yeah.
Like, if there's still bad shit coming up in your performance review at the end of the year, it's the meeting where I'm telling you you're fired.
Here's an example. I tried to steal one of DeMarco's guys, and he went straight to the finance office. They gave him a bump, and he stayed. That's how it should be done.
Yeah.
I mean, within reason, But.
Yeah. But it's very much, and that kind of leads into another question I had. It was like, even me messaging you, like when I was like, hey, I forget exactly how I worded it. It was basically, hey, do you want to talk shit about the stuff that you couldn't say when you were employed? And you were like, hell yeah. But even like, just simply the fact that you have, if you're in an organization where you have things that you think are important to be brought up, but you don't feel like you can bring them up, isn't that like the biggest red flag of all?
Of course. Diversity is where everyone looks different and thinks the same.
Yeah.
We want to hear all opinions that agree with us.
Yes.
Because, I not all the time, but if there was going to be a guy to have that opinion in meetings, I'd be like, put my hand up and say stuff like that.
And it wouldn't just be like, I mean, some people do like, oh, devil's advocate. Most people who are like devil's advocate is just them being like, I'm an asshole.
Yeah.
But if it's like,
I mean, that too. Yeah.
Yeah. But if it has like a true thought process behind it, like you should never, if a truly high functioning organizations, they never, like, you're not going to have something where somebody leaving is going to be like, oh, this, and this, and this. It'd be like, oh, well, because if maybe they did have issues and that's why they leave, but you knew about them well in advance because you fostered an environment where things that are going poorly from like somebody's eyes of who's a critical thinker. Yeah. Those things aren't just like accepted when they're brought up. They're like encouraged, and it's like demanded that they're
well, for our high performance staff, I forget his name, but he works at the Dolphins. And one of the things that I wrote down from him is he said, we were talking, he said, I am not my idea. I'm the advocate for the idea. So when you critique the idea, I'm not taking it personally. Yeah. And what we tried to do is basically everything that we put out, we're talking to one another and say, right, shoot holes in this. I never put out a program to the boys that I hadn't taken to Eric first or taken to Scott, even though I was in charge of it. I was like, right, what's wrong with this? Think about what could go wrong. Think about what needs to change.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And even like, I forgot, I had something on the tip of my tongue. But,
I was going to say, that's something that Shadid and I have talked about, I mean, like in the past, somewhat recently, is just like the problem of, in general, and we kind of talked about before we even started recording, just like the problem with the ego associated with anything that you do and being too self-conscious with anything you're putting forth ends up like you hold on to the feeling so much of it being critiqued that you end up being the idea. And then it's like, if there's any holes that may be poked in it, you're getting the holes poked in you, and it's just, you got to try and fight it somehow.
It's balance, dude. It's balance, because I think I'm being biased to be ahead of performance in a male dominated sport. There's a certain personality type that lends itself to that. And if there are quiet introverted guys that do it, they do a really good impression of an extrovert when they have to. But generally you're gonna if you have 100 set of eyes on you, you're gonna have a little bit of ego to be able to do that, especially when you've never worked in the sport before and they outweigh you by 50 pounds, and who the fuck is this English guy? But then again, it's keeping that in check.
Yeah. And even too, another tip of my tongue. I was saying, like, I that's something I have to check myself on, where it's like the attacking the, or not attacking, but critiquing the idea, not the person. Is that sometimes if I'm bringing something up, I have to be like, oh, wait, like, no, like checking myself on that. Do you have, I guess, like when you started putting out more like materials that are from, whether it's you online or either one of your websites, do you find that, because there's like the realm where it's like, hey, we're trying to implement the best program for the guys. Yeah. And whoever those ideas come from, it doesn't matter. Like we talked about this before, like a bunch of our network that we do is from AC of what he does with men's lacrosse. Cause we were like, me and Shadid were sitting one day and we were like, our neck work is like stale. Like it just needs, and we were asked AC and we we're like, oh, that's way better than ours. Cool. And our guys, like deceleration of their head when they get hit doesn't care who the idea came from.
Nope.
But that's a little bit, I feel like it's easier in that situation to separate yourself because it's like, okay, we're caring about these dudes and what ends up getting implemented. But do you find it harder when you're releasing like any sort of materials or like something on Rugby Strength Coach where it's like literally has my name on it and I'm releasing it? Do you find it harder to deal with critiques from that, or is it still like, hey, you paid for it?
Dude, it's, what was it Alan Cosgrove put up the other day? It's like, if I wouldn't ask you for advice, I'm not going to ask you for a critique.
Fair.
And it just, when it comes to putting stuff out online, it's one-way traffic. I put it out and I don't fucking care. Because it's like, you just got to put it out there. And obviously, if somebody you respect from your circle, you know their credentials, you know their backgrounds, like, hey, have you thought about this? And then you can change stuff like that. And then it's good for material because you just put out another article and say, oh, it's wrong about this. But yeah, I mean, there's tons of stuff that I've done wrong. And again, I've spoken to people where it does hurt the ego. Like you put out, like I remember Robert Palker. I put out, we're remodeling collagen when we do self-line fascia release, and he's like, no, it's not. It's bullshit. It's got the tensile strength of steel. You're not doing anything other than temporary inhibition of the nervous system.
Yeah.
Who the fuck's this guy? And he ended up coming to visit me in Tokyo. So he just like sting to the ego for 5 minutes. And you're like, it's just adult physical education. That's all it is.
Yeah.
Keep things in perspective.
Yeah. Even like a good rule I've had for myself is putting anything out and somebody responds and blah, blah, blah. This is whatever. The people whose opinions that I'm like, okay, I'm listening to this. You said something was wrong. They usually have my number and they text me about it.
Bingo. Yeah.
If I get a text, like whatever, it's DeMarco or somebody, like if I get a text from them, then I'm like, okay, like but if it's just like some random like comment, I'm like, meh.
Dude, I put one up the other day. I just said, telling people that you're shamelessly promoting is actually less shameful than, pretending not to do it and trying to sell someone.
Yeah.
And someone's like, surely by shamelessly, you cannot have any more shame, blah, 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 blah. And I was just like, bro, that's time that both of us are never going to get back. And rather than take the clear intent of the tweet, you decided to correct a slight grammatical flaw. Thank you. And he didn't reply.
Yes. Yeah. Arguing semantics is the lowest form of human interaction.
Yes. You're going to be laying on your deathbed and be like, fuck, I'm so glad I corrected that guy on the internet.
Yeah. Was I supposed to say less or fewer?
Yeah.
Yeah. No doubt. So one tweet that you did put out like right after you announced, I think it was like the day after you announced you were leaving. You talked about the inefficiency of having multiple lift groups in a collegiate football setting.
Yes.
And you did all the math, and I don't necessarily need to go look it up if you're listening to this, so I don't have to just read all the numbers. But you're going through just like how it's inefficient from a time worked perspective for us to have multiple lift groups throughout in a college setting. So without explaining it, just go into kind of that thought process. And I have a couple like follow-up questions that I just kind of wanted to ask without typing on a tweet. So.
Okay. In the real world where businesses make a lot of money, there's product delivery and there's product development. Okay, so look at the iPod. They don't even do iPods anymore. Look at the iPhone from 2008. How's that iPhone compared to now?
Mm-hmm.
Shit.
Yeah.
Okay. They have a department at Apple that looks at what's good, what's not good, how do we work on this, how do we iterate it, how do we make it better. In big fancy businesses where they have the money to do that, there's a clear delineation between you are in product delivery or fulfillment and product development. Now, unfortunately, in collegiate sport, you're responsible for both.
Yeah.
So if you look at, businesses like Google, you're expected to put aside 20% of your working week to work on free time, which is a project that's going to move the organization closer towards the stated mission. The R&D budget of the US military runs into the billions every year, whether it be Atlassian do it, tons of other businesses understand that you have to be working to put yourself out of business. If you're getting better and better at delivering the same product again and again and again, well, that's great and it's efficient, but it doesn't move forward. Okay. If you look at the way the average day is spent as a collegiate strength and conditioning coach, it's all product delivery and no product development. So you say, oh, he's got 20 years of experience. No, he doesn't. He's got 1 year of experience 20 times. So considering that, considering the fact that it's just a fact. If you're doing 6 groups in a row, I feel bad for group 6 because it's going to be everyone's drinking Sappuccinos by the end. The energy is going to go down. The focus is going to go down. So it's my opinion that you should be looking for the maximum amount of people in the lift as long as your ratios are intact. Everyone's getting good attention and you have the space and facilities to do it. And the rich football teams do have the ability to do so. And you should get in, do good work, get out, and then spend the rest of the time moving the program forward, as opposed to do a group, 5-minute piss break, do a group, train yourself, do a group, do a group, do a group, do a group. Oh, you've got practice. And it's maybe not in every environment. The reply will always be, oh, well, class schedules. Well, you told me you're all about winning championships. Change the class schedules. Bring in a tutor. Can you imagine if you told a sport coach, sorry about that, the classes turned out a little bit funny, so you're going to have to run this practice 5 times. Yeah. Can you imagine? They'd be like, no, fucking fix the class schedules.
Yeah.
This is the, if I am paying you, and I'm paying you really $250,000 over 5 years to come and win me a championship, I am going to make every decision through that filter of, does this help us win a championship? Okay, if we can block out X hours for practice, we're going to block out a little bit more for strength conditioning or, physical prep, all that kind of stuff. And then the rest of the time, you're going to go off and work on a project and move this organization closer towards its stated goal, rather than us, what I wrote down to myself was Rolls-Royce objectives, Toyota mentality. It's the industrialization of strength and conditioning. They expect you to be professional, and then they set you up like a conveyor belt worker.
Yeah.
Disconnect, in my opinion.
Yeah, no doubt. I guess when I was first reading it, that was what the flip side of it. I was like, you definitely, there's the fine line of like finding out for yourself and your own staff where the dip is in terms of like, I don't know the exact number. I couldn't pick it out. But there's definitely like a number of dudes in this room because it's just me and Deed. And sometimes, we do have an intern who's like really solid. So most groups it's 3.
Yeah.
But there's definitely like, I don't have an exact number, but there's like a number of dudes in this room where it's like, quality definitely like dipped a little bit.
Agree. And it varies. It varies by.
So it's important to find where that number is. Now, if it was 5 full-time of us, and
you can do it in one, in my opinion. Like five full-time guys and a sports scientist that's definitely not a strength coach, Texas,
and a nutritionist. Yeah,
there you go. Plus a bunch of interns. That's 10-1.
Yeah,
any good coach can handle 10 athletes.
Yeah, especially if you got. Yeah, and you can get around the there's all the compliance bullshit of like 5 coaches in a football setting, but like, what compliance officer at any university actually cares? We have buddies who interned for Doyle at Iowa, and then actually some of them were there when Nick was still there.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing. They had like 6 or 7 interns, and they're all fully coaching, and it's like, you got 12 dudes on the floor, and they have 30 fucking racks in their room. It's like,
apparently Iowa football has bigger issues now.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah. But even so, like, I'm thinking, I feel like the number of people, like, from a weight room perspective, when the number of people who were like, quality dipped, I feel like the number for on the field stuff is definitely lower.
Oh, really?
If we're I would say, like if we had, say the number's 35 guys in this room, and if we go to 40, it's like, felt a little lost in here. I feel like on the field, if you're getting into like intricate, like, and you're really trying to like watch how your dudes' feet are interacting with the ground and like really actually try to like get specific with that stuff, I feel like maybe the number even needs to be lower. Like if, but then that gets into like how many people are actually coaching that and doing anything with that sort of information.
Well, I do like waterfall starts, so I try and build it into build it into the rest periods.
Yeah, I mean, we've done that where it's, you just waterfall start, iPad, and that's like, hey, you guys have 3 minutes rest, and then like I know the 6 kids who I know, like, okay, I need to talk to him, and you just go down with the iPad and like boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I definitely agree with what you're saying, because I found myself doing that too, and now that we're in season, and it's lacrosse usually is like an hour of my day. It's nothing crazy.
Yeah.
But then it's like, okay, whether you go to like, we got a non-travel lift, and then maybe we had all sorts of fucked up class schedules. So we ended up having 4 lifts in a row.
Yeah.
And it was the same thing where at the end of the 4th, we were like, what the fuck just happened?
Dude, before I left, I did 11 back-to-back with no break.
Yeah, right when we got back, we definitely didn't have 11. But we had, like, very first day back, first couple weeks back, COVID style, where we did not enter the weight room. We did three, maybe two full weeks where we didn't enter the weight room. It was just all on field, like contact prep, sprint, jump, throw, just all sorts of non-weight room stuff. And 2 p.m., 3 p.m., 4 p.m., 5 p.m., 6 p.m. And it was like 90 degrees. And we were like all in like full like safari gear with like
well, you know what it was? It was what prompted it for me was I had a conversation with somebody who worked at a massive football program.
Yeah.
And he said he was in a session where there were more coaches and interns on the floor than athletes.
That's a problem.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a waste of resources at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because I know of people who have been at larger programs where they split it up almost where it's like, you got 5 guys and I'm responsible directly for offensive skill.
That's how it should be, in my opinion, because it's like
and if the offensive skill guys
detail.
If the offensive skill guys, maybe I consolidate them all to 2 different groups.
Yeah.
And so I've got 10 of them at 9 a.m. and 12 of them at 10:30.
Yeah.
And then like there's another lift group at 2, but it's all linemen and I don't work with them. So during that time, I'm in my office hammering away on some project that's
as it should be. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought that's an interesting way to split it up.
But you know why? It's like people get nervous because when you can't clearly demonstrate and point to and say, this is my contribution to the organization, this is what you can measure me on, they just try and compete on hours worked.
Yeah, no doubt.
It's like being in Japan. Like, Japan is the worst for that. America's like a close second. So it's like ABC, always be coaching, be in the building, make the most noise, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. It's like, hey, I would just love for you to judge me on the results and I'll just come and go as I want. I used to, I'll admit it now, I used to schedule all the teams into like a block for my coaches that were responsible to them. And I used to like tell white guys, like, oh, sorry, the gym's full at that time, can't do it. So I had coaches come in at 12 p.m. and then leave at 8 p.m. Mm-hmm. So I tried to split it up where I had a morning guy, a middle of the day guy, and a late day guy. And then me and Scott ended up doing the whole day. But, I think, from a staff perspective, when you do that, it gets noticed and it gets appreciated. Because when you're just like, oh, so, Tony, sorry, Tony, fuck you. Need you in at 6 a.m. Then you got nothing for 8 hours. Then I'll need you on the floor for 6 consecutive hours. Mm-hmm. Why do that to someone?
Yeah. And even too, like some of the best coaches that I've been around personally, I know one, he was at Minnesota when I was interning there. He's now with the Seattle Seahawks. He was so good at he hammered, during free time in the middle of the day, hammered away at his work. When the last group was done,
see ya.
I was just intern, kind of cleaning some stuff. And maybe it was we're checking in about hey, what time do you need me in the morning? And he'd already be backpack on, walking out the door. And I was like, fuck yeah, dude. he had a young son, like all that.
Yeah.
Like, and that Coach Shadid said when he was with Coach Jackson at Ole Miss, that's how he was. It was like,
Yeah.
hey, we're gonna we have a break in the middle of the day, get all your shit done during that time, and then bounce. Like, and I feel like
Dan Howes, when we worked together at London Wasps, I came in on there was no academy training for the day, and I walked in. He's like, "What the fuck are you doing here?" I was like, "Doing work." He goes, "You don't have to be here. Go home."
Yeah. We had actually I just got off a call before we started this where Shadid was like, today we were in at like 9 to get some stuff ready before the afternoon because we had to organize some stuff, and then we don't really have to do that tomorrow. So he was like, fuck it, 1 p.m. I don't know, like whatever.
Yeah.
It's just like in figuring out, I don't know, even the people who can recognize that like that's okay. I don't know, I catch myself sometimes too. Like I didn't have to be until like 9:30 today. And I woke up, like my body, I just naturally wake up. I'm up at 7, and I was like, "Fuck, am I gonna do?"
Hey, let me share a secret with you. The work never dries up. It's there's always going to be something more to do. So look, you might as well just do, my thing, because what I'm good at is like trying to think a big picture. And when you do that, you kind of draw back, you see everything that you have to do. What I try and tell myself is every single day, do one thing that moves you closer to what it was you came here to do.
Mm-hmm.
And every day.
Yeah.
And if you do that, it's okay.
Yeah. So interesting, I guess more like personal goal type thing, a question that I had for you, because you've stated publicly like, hey, my ultimate goal is like whatever the title ends up being, but like basically director of performance for an NFL football team.
Yeah.
And has your interactions with the American sports system changed that? Or do you think this current diversion away from being in an organization is just a step back to help you gather your thoughts before you go after that? Or has the end goal kind of fundamentally changed?
I think it will help me ultimately. I think it will end up being, if I do it, it will be on a consultancy role where I just want to, when Nick makes it, for example, I'll go in and do a bit for Nick and then, work on my own stuff. But one thing that I've really come to realize in the last year is even when you're a high level employee, you're still an employee, and there's a whole lot of constraints that come with that. Yeah. So someone's going to tell you where you have to be, when you have to be there. They can still get rid of you at a moment's notice. And, Eric got a lot of money from the Houston Texans, and Eric did a good job. And they told him, hey, you got a job for next year. And he's like, and then they come back a month later and like, oh, yeah, we lied. We're going to get rid of you. So, what did he do wrong? So they gave him a bunch of money, and then the money dried up and he's got to find some more money. So it's like, I've realized that the freedom to be where I want, say what I want, work how I want, and the security of employment, to me, is insecurity in disguise. Because for the most part, there is going to be that competition between the business that you own and the business that you work for if you're an employee. And it's not to say that you can't do both, but you're not going to, it is true that you can't commit fully to one or the other when you're doing both. And not rightly so, but most organizations would expect that you do not do any business on your own time if you're working at that level. And what they're basically saying is, please allow us to put you in the position where we can fire you at the drop of a hat and you have no safety net. And please be grateful for that opportunity. And I thought, not for me.
Yeah.
So yes, but on my terms. And if they're like, well, we're never going to deal with you on your terms, I'm at peace with it.
Yeah, I can see that for sure.
Yeah.
Like being in college football I go back and forth with that a bunch, where it's like, I love the amount of detail we get to do with these dudes. Like, we have a lot of toys, we have all sorts of resources, we get these dudes like 48 out of 52 weeks of the year. Like,
yeah,
it's awesome. Like, there's so many other sports that are home for 10 weeks of the summer and stuff like just that level of like, here we go. We get to dial in on these dudes. You know, you pretty much only get that in like a football, men's women's basketball, and out here in ice hockey. But like, and I love that level of detail. But then there's the flip side of like, you know, if we, I don't know, however many years, but if we if we don't turn it around, like, we're just gonna be gone. And
that's turn it around as an organization. You can be knocking it out of the park.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, we have to be winning games. Yeah, it's kind of back and forth, and I keep getting drawn towards like just the level of detail and like how much we get to just like have fun. Where you get to the end of like a training cycle and it's like, you know, say it's an 8-week summer, we get to the end and it's like everything that we wanted to implement from a sports performance perspective, we were able to do. There was no caveats. There was no like, oh, with our resources or with our situation. It was just like the program that we wanted to do, we were able to do it. And
it's pretty rare. It's pretty rare.
From a performance perspective, getting to do that is just like, I don't see myself giving it up for quite some time. But then it's like, I see the flip side where it's like, you know, we could keep crushing it like that, and things completely out of our control could go haywire and we get canned. But
yeah, it's you know, there's a time and a place for it. I think everyone.
Yeah.
Maybe not everyone, but it's like, you know, you're not going to find any shortage of people that want to put themselves in that position.
Yeah, correct.
But it's just you know, got to me, I kind of had the thought of, well, maybe I should hold on and then I can get a Power 5 job or an NFL job. And I thought, still the same problems. You know, there's still sport coaches at the Power 5 level or the NFL that are going to be difficult to deal with. I actually really like the football staff at William & Mary, but you know, it's just a cliche. It's like the sport coach is going to tell you what your program is going to look like. You know, I just thought it was going to be same problems, same constraints on personal life, and more money. And to be honest, it's easier to make money outside of that environment, and you get to dictate what your day-to-day looks like. What's hard, truthfully, is like the ego fluff of getting to associate yourself with a particular organization, because I guarantee you the number of people that have my phone number will disappear and go like this. But you know, I've had it in my career, so I don't need it anymore.
Yeah, but I feel like even before that, you were known for so much for your like ideas, and anyway, that like even me on here saying like, oh, formerly of William & Mary, like,
yeah,
listening to this and
I fucking hate when people put on Twitter former, and then they list all these fucking organizations. Like, I don't care.
Yeah,
I don't care.
Yeah, but somebody listening to this in 5 years isn't going to be like, oh, Keir doesn't work with a team anymore. Like, the ideas carry themselves, whereas I feel like the insecurity of not being tied to an organization is when you know deep down, like, you're not actually providing that much value, and you just have a cool maybe O on your polo.
Yeah.
So
I see what you did there. Yeah, I was talking to Richie Gray about that, and you know, he's kind of jokingly said, he said the profit always comes from outside the village. Now, I'm not saying I'm Jesus, however, I like what he said, and it certainly factored into it, where I thought, what is going to be the greatest kind of leverage or impact of, you know, all my experiences and stuff like that. And I thought, well, you know, if I do a really, really good job at William & Mary, I can impact 100 athletes and 5 or 6 coaches. Or if I go all in with the education piece, I might be able to reach hundreds or thousands of coaches. And that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah. I mean, even the shirt you're wearing, I've heard Stu talk about, like, that was the model that Altus wanted to kind of show. It's like, hey, if we absolutely destroy an Olympic cycle, we might help 16 athletes or something. Like, at some points they had close to 100 athletes, but like, even still triple digits versus like the number of people that they impact and then athletes that they indirectly impact through simply just like, hey, we're doing this virtual ACP, and like you get 1,500 people who sign up for it. Like, I mean, obviously it helps them financially, but like from a reach standpoint, like you almost feel maybe not undervaluing the day-to-day coaching, but like Dan Paff's brain just coaching Antonio Brown one-on-one.
Yeah.
Like, is that valuable? Absolutely. But his brain needs to be
absolutely
well.
You remember in Futurama where they used to keep him in a jar? Yeah.
we need to save him at all costs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think I mean, even as I was saying it, when I was like, this environment is too tempting for me still, and I was even in my brain, I'm like, that'll probably change when me and Lauren have kids. But how do you think? I mean, having a kid yourself, and then I feel like even in the same timeline, like Strength Coach Network, Rugby Strength Coach, it seemed to like fucking explode around the same time. And maybe that's wrong, and that's just external seeing it. But it seems like those things kind of went together. So was it nice to have? I mean, you talk so much about like don't have, you know, your job be your only income. Like, was it personally very satisfying to be like, oh fuck yeah, like I get to actually live this and be like, hey, I'm fed up with this, so I'm leaving, and have the outside income? And like, was it very personally satisfying to like see those things come to fruition when you do like talk about them so much?
You know, I could have walked away anyway, because like I had, when I left Japan, I'd saved $250,000. That was why I chose to work for 14 grand a year at Richmond.
Yeah.
Because I could. Like, in Hollywood, they call it one for the man and one for me. So you do like that bullshit superhero movie, and then you go and do like your art house picture that nobody's going to watch and stuff like that. That was what I basically told myself. Yeah. So I could have left anyway. And
gotcha. Okay.
It was, it certainly helps. You're right. It certainly helps. It has grown. It wasn't like a satisfaction, because if you've done your job well, there should be a gap when you leave. And when there is that gap, there's people that have relied on you to an extent, and you may have to accept the reality that when you leave, that, you know, the people that you love to help so much and see do well, that, you know, you're leaving them behind. And, you know, it's when I do reflect on, you know, all the teams that I've been to and all, you know, the athletes I worked with, you miss those interactions and you miss those relationships more than, oh, that game day was exciting, because it just goes by in a blur. Like, when you think back, you know, 5-10 years, it's always the relationships that stick in your mind, and, oh, you know, I had a funny conversation with that guy and we had good fun doing this training session, stuff like that. So, you know, from a personal perspective, I'll miss the opportunity to have those. And I actually thought about volunteering at a high school moving forward, just to, you know, keep a little bit of skin in the game, stay credible, and you know, if I do have anything to offer athletes, you know, I can give it to them for free.
Yeah, when we talked to Wendler, that's what he does. Yeah, and he's got his own website, and I think he still is in some way affiliated with Elite FTS. Yeah, but he trains that high school, and he's like, yeah, just do that for fun. Like,
he's also like, no one can tell me what to do. So if they don't like the program, I'm done. It doesn't matter.
The ultimate freedom. No doubt. Cool. Sweet. I think that's probably a good little stopping point right there. We're right at about an hour. But we really appreciate you doing this. I mean, we kind of went all over the place, but that's kind of what we expected. And hopefully a lot of people can take, you know, some good things from your experience, you're now being pretty vocal and just like open and
open the kimono, baby.
I know we appreciate it, because even just some of the things you've talked about in terms of like outside revenue and all that. I mean, we may see if TED Talks, like, we live in all these college towns, like, why don't we buy a house and rent it out? Like, I think that's something that you're doing. I talked with Nick about that last night, but just like some of those like things that outside of the actual job, that as younger coaches, you don't learn about that when you're doing your GA or whatever. Like,
I think what it is like, I'm dragging this thing out for you. I'm sorry, but it's like,
No worries.
when you're adopting the mindset of the job is at the center of your life, you don't think about it. But when you understand that the job is just a piece of your life, then you have to kind of expand your horizons a little bit. Think, well, how does this fit into the grander scheme of my life? Because that kind of like archetypal divorce strength coach in his 40s, with in the workout gear in the gut, you see that and you're like, not for me, no thank you.
Yeah.
So it's like, to me, it's like the job should serve you, not the other way around.
Yeah, I love that. That's good. That's probably a good note for, I don't know, I've had to check myself on that sometimes too, where it's like, I don't know, I fit into the model where I'm naturally pretty introverted.
Yeah.
And all of my extroversion energy is for these dudes.
Yeah.
And Lauren said a couple times where she's like, hey, motherfucker, like, I exist too. And I'm like, you can't leave all that extra, like, you can't be like, oh, all my human interactions. Like, but like, those are the things that people just like don't talk about as much. And it's like, whatever, like, I have those interactions where it's like I'm selling out for these dudes because it's like, oh, we got to win or we're outie. But then you go home and Lauren's like, hey, like, you got to have some extroversion here too.
Yeah. Well, I said to a colleague, I said, I am not going to help raise somebody else's child at the expense of my own. Which is, fairly heavy, but
yeah, it's true. Yeah, especially yeah, I mean, even ours is expanded even a little more just because we're both coaches, but it's at some point there's going to be a compromise and say, we figure it out. But I know that's one thing Shadid does super well is like, he always said, like, I know there's like the kind of cliche of like how you do anything is how you do everything, except for the things that don't really matter. Like, like I'm fucking terrible at washing dishes. It doesn't make me a bad sports performance coach, but well, like the energy that's like, I have to be really, like, if you find the things that you actually really need to be good at, then like everything that relates to those things is kind of how you do all those things. Because it's like there are very few, I mean, there are the kind of people where it's like you sell out fully to give everything to the job and then you're an absolute ass bag at home. But then it's like, if you really poked holes in what they're doing at the job, like there's probably a lot of holes.
Yeah.
But the people who are like well-rounded, even the guy I was talking about who was so good about like, oh, the last group's done, I'm outie. Like he would always say like, it was some example of somebody like a prominent strength coach who was like going through a divorce or something like that. And he was like, are you fucking kidding me? If anything at home started getting to the point where it was looking like we were going to get a divorce because of my job, he was like, I would just walk out. I would just quit and figure something. I was like, I would go work at fucking UPS before I got a divorce. Are you kidding me? Like, how?
Well, I always used to tell my interns and say, hey, there's plenty more women out there in the strength and conditioning jobs. Yeah. What an ending.
Yeah. I don't know. I just, me and AC have both appreciated. I mean, your candor is always appreciated, but then also just like not, diving outside of just like, here's this program to help with patellar tendonitis or whatever the fuck.
Who gives a fuck about that?
Yeah, and it's like actually diving outside of that to be like, hey, here's how to set yourself up long term so that you can be happier outside to then actually provide a better product to the athletes. Because even if you look at it from a selfish perspective of just like, okay, how can we win more games? Like, even if you just look at it from purely that selfish perspective, like a better you at work is going to help win more games. So even if you're an asshole who only has those motivations, like having your outside life in line, whether it's financially, socially, whatever, is going to help you because then you can just devote more mental energy to like, let's win some ball games.
Amen.
So yeah, we've always appreciated your content and candor when it comes to that stuff. So
thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Appreciate it.